version.
Oh, in the second version. Yeah, that's
right,
true.
which is the one you're saying that you find more plausible.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I just, I just think the MO of that second one sounds more plausible. But...
Well, but okay, so
why not a
keep
combination?
in mind?
Why not both?
Keep
Steve?
in mind that Emma Lou is the mother, correct?
No, Emma Lou was the daughter.
Okay, so it's Lena.
Lena
was hit in the head with a rock, and she did have her throat slit, and she was drugged away from where it appears she was hit. So that's consistent with the MO.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that, the other thing about it is I don't think he would have stuck around to slit Lena's throat. If Emma Lou's running away, there's a witness.
Yeah.
You're going to go catch her and bash her head in.
Yeah.
And then you're going to go do all the throat slitting part of things.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, after Emma Lou's account hit the papers and everybody had heard the description of the killer, we had our first confirmed attempt at a copycat killing.
Ooh.
Yeah. This is somebody named Katie Cochran. She wanted to murder her husband's girlfriend.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, I know. And her name was Maddie Alexander. So Mrs. Cochran was tall, so she figured she could pass herself off as the Ripper. So she dressed herself up in a black suit and a wide-brimmed Stetson hat, and then went and then went over to Maddie's house with a straight razor. And by the way, the whole thing about him wearing a black suit and a wide-brimmed hat, he didn't necessarily wear the same costume every time. Only one person saw him one time. I mean, he might have mixed up his wardrobe a little bit.
Hopefully.
So anyway, he goes over to Maddie's.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Okay. Now what?
I was just going to say, in the early 1900s, it's not as though people had, extensive wardrobes, right?
No, that's a good point.
It's not as though you had a closet full of clothes. You had different, there was such a thing as having different collar pieces. You would replace the collar on your shirt because that was what would get dirty and sweaty.
Mm-hmm.
You would wear the same shirt, the same suit jacket, the same pants for literally as long as you could.
No, that's a good point.
So it's not unreasonable to think that he might have had something the same or even very similar that were all interchangeable.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other reason to wear dark clothes is at night, blood doesn't show up on them.
Well, they just don't show dirt as much.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about the blood in general, and then kneeling over
red,
a victim.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wear red.
No, black is probably better. It
black
absorbs
works.
the blood and...
No, it helps you blend
Joe saw Deadpool, obviously.
Yeah, I haven't
where that joke is coming from.
I have not seen Deadpool yet. I want to see it. But
I can tell you as a lady who has to deal with blood on a very regular basis, black is the color.
Okay.
It's not red.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about the confrontation between Katie Cochran and Maddie Alexander.
Yeah.
So she goes over to her house with a straight razor, and her idea was to lure her out of the house and then kill her. Maddie answered the door, but not surprisingly refused to leave her house.
What?
Because it was out in the news that maybe Katie Cochran shouldn't have telegraphed her intentions by dressing up like the Ripper.
That seems silly.
Yeah. She also made the mistake of talking about this to a couple of women, one of whom ratted her out.
I love that. You know what I think I'm going to do tonight? I think I'm going to be the Atlanta Ripper.
Yeah, I'm just going to go murder somebody.
I'm just going to go kill somebody.
Yeah.
I just don't like her very much, so I'm going to kill her.
I know. She's screwing around with my husband. I'm going to go slit her throat. So she got 30 days in jail for that one.
30 days?
I know.
That's it?
Well, she didn't actually attempt the murder. She
kind of attempted the murder.
Well, she was planning on doing it.
She didn't do anything.
She didn't actually
to
cause bodily
harm this woman.
All right, that's fair.
There's a lot of rulings that are around this case that are 27 days in jail. It's like, what?
Why?
Like today, that would be a 5-year sentence.
At least.
Yeah, there was some guy who was arrested and tried for. We're going to talk about him in a second, anyway.
All right.
Here he is. Yeah, July 1911, right around the same time. A guy named Jim Murphy was put on trial. It wasn't like the trial of the century because his crime was threatening to cut his wife's throat.
So it's a threat.
Yeah, it was a threat. Apparently, it was motivated by jealousy, and so he wanted to cut her throat. And at trial, somebody mentioned the possibility that Jim Murphy might actually be the Ripper. This is one of the guys who was one of the doubters. The judge at the trial, a guy named N.R. Broyles, said, and I'm quoting here, quote, "There is no such thing in Atlanta as a Negro Jack the Ripper," unquote. And he then went on to say, quote, "There are at least 1,000 Negro men in Atlanta today who stand ready to cut the throats of their wives at the slightest provocation."
I feel
unquote.
like you could edit that to say there are at least 10,000 men in Atlanta today who stand ready to cut the throats of their wives.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
yeah. This guy. But anyway, this guy was, kind
Didn't
of a
we
skeptic.
say? Wasn't that a quote that we had recently that was like the only thing that makes you a murderer is matrimony? That was like a couple months ago. There was something about that.
Can't remember which one that was.
That sounds vaguely familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, he was kind of a skeptic about this, and it appears a lot of the white population of Atlanta thought that this was just a case of black people doing what black people do, which in their opinion was just killing each other.
Which is kind of a shame.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Julia Wallace.
Julia Wallace.
It was Julia Wallace.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
From a similar time period, in fact.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was right about that time, yeah.
Ish. Before 1950. That's all the same time period, right?
Oh, totally.
Between 1850 and 1950. The same
Well,
time
according
period.
to some people, that era in time was made up. So,
I don't know if it was that particular spot.
It wasn't that spot.
It wasn't that one.
Yeah, it was
earlier.
A little
it was
earlier
much
than
earlier.
that. Yeah.
That's a different episode.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. That's kind of an interesting theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, anyway, other
So
locals...
most people thought most of the white population kind of thought it was a hoax, huh?
No, I wouldn't even say most, but there was a substantial
The
number
people
of
who maybe you wouldn't want to think it was a hoax, like
Yeah.
judges and police officers and sheriffs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if not a hoax, it wasn't connected.
Sure.
So, it wasn't one guy doing it all. It just happened to be a bunch of murders that happened to look similar that were not, according to the authorities, done by the same person.
Yeah, you gotta
Kind of like the smiley face murders.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Just like
like, yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible. I think it's unlikely, but it's entirely possible that these were all just random murders. It could be. I doubt it. Oh, another theory that was out there was a local sheriff named Plenty Minor actually said that the killings were probably jealous wives who were just knocking off their husbands' girlfriends. Just maybe he was inspired by Katie Cochran. I don't know. And of course, we should remember back in those days, the whole phrase serial killer had not yet been invented, and maybe some people just couldn't wrap their minds around the idea that a single person would go around murdering random people.
Well, it took.
I mean, we take that for granted
several
nowadays.
serial killers who were quite prolific to be busted and have very concrete evidence brought forward before I think that people just would actually accept it. It's like, nah, there's no way that guy killed all those people and stuffed them in his basement. And then they haul him all out of his basement and they go, oh, that's weird.
That's such a weird thing. Maybe we should investigate at some point.
What's that?
What did this thing not exist before this time? Was it way less prevalent, or was it just not?
The concept of a serial killer?
Not the concept. Did people just, in 1700s, were there not serial killers?
I heard
I would assume there had to have been, but were there not as many? Because there weren't as many people, or what?
Well, there's that, but
it's such an interesting question to me. Again, for another episode.
Well,
I've
heard now that you mentioned that, I heard a very interesting theory regarding that, and that is that serial killers have always been with us, and that is actually quite possibly the genesis of a lot of our monster tales, things like the werewolves and vampires and things like that. A lot of those superstitions might be from these weird killings that were happening, thousands of years ago. People in a village were showing up, disemboweled and cut into pieces and stuff like that. And so people invented monsters. So maybe
that's an interesting theory.
It is, and it's kind of hard to check out if it's true or not.
Yeah.
Without getting in the Wayback Machine. At this time, of course, in Atlanta, you can imagine black folks mostly believed in the Ripper's existence because, he was killing them.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, it was a scary time. A lot of people started spending a whole lot more time at home, believe it or not, especially at night.
Which probably, escalated the killing because, oh my God, I'm around my family all the time. I'm going to kill them.
Yeah.
I know that feel.
Those guys are
I know that feel solidly.
Yeah. Anyway, the black women were afraid of being murdered, and black men were afraid of getting arrested and accused of being the Ripper, because especially after
it's a total climate of fear. Yeah.
Well, yeah, definitely. And after the mayor started putting pressure on the police, you could see how the cops might just decide to pin it on somebody. You know?
Which they did.
Yeah,
A
they
couple
did.
of times.
They at least tried. They arrested some people for it. Let's get back to our victim list. So we're almost done with that. The next murder, number 7, was on July 10th, 1911. That was Sadie Hawley. Her body was found by some workmen. She'd been bashed in the head with a large stone, which was found nearby. And then she was dragged off and her throat was cut. And in this case, her shoes had been cut off her feet, which was kind of an interesting thing.
That was not indicative of.
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
That it's indicative. It's indicative of the weird psychology of a serial killer.
Right, but it's not something that we had seen in the prior 6 cases that we know of.
Yeah.
Her shoes had been cut off her feet. Her feet hadn't been.
Correct.
Yeah. No.
Okay. My brain
This is
was
not
like,
the Salish Sea.
yeah. I'm sorry. My brain interpreted that the wrong way.
Yeah. I
So
don't.
her shoes were cut. Were her shoes found close to her body?
Yeah, pretty close.
But they were found.
They were found. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as though they were taken as a souvenir.
No, they weren't. The next murder I'm going to talk about, this is the one that might be real or it might be a copycat. This is one of the ones that McLaughlin and Bing took off their list, but I'm going to put it back on at least for a second here. Her shoes were also removed, and other than that, it was the usual MO, except for one other thing. This was Minnie Wise, by the way, and her right index finger had been hacked off at the middle joint, which was a little change up in the MO, and I had no idea why that happened. There's no real earthly reason for it that I can think of, although maybe, again, just some escalation.
Or it was a defensive.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, she
guess.
may have seen him coming and put up her hand, and he took a swipe at her
Uh-huh.
and
That
happened to catch a finger.
Would have had to have
Yeah.
been a roll sharp knife
And
to
a big,
cut through a finger bone.
and a
So
big old
listen,
sharp.
some of
Fell
these attacks, the bodies are described as the heads nearly being taken off.
Okay, but so like, just in terms of like the physics of cutting a finger off.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, going through the bone and everything like that.
In
yeah.
the air,
He would have to hit it perfectly.
it would have had to been
super
perfect.
sharp and super on target. I get that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that, it's the only
But
reason.
so like, but that's a different thing for me. Like, it's pretty easy if you're. I'm sorry for the morbidity of this, but if a victim is laying, on their back on the ground, it's not so hard to shove a sharp knife in and pull it across to almost sever a head versus like in the air, my hands are up.
Oh, no, I get it.
Going through bone.